At the train station, everyone was greeted by someone. Except her. Snow on her coat, a letter in her hand. No one came, because she was too old. But someone saw her, silently, deeply, and in that moment, the course of fate changed. This is a story of a second chance, a quiet kind of salvation, and a reminder that love runs deeper than age. We're just a few steps away from reaching our first 1,500 subscribers, our growing family. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you to everyone who's brought us this far. With your support, we grow stronger with every story. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time. The melodies of snow were falling like the notes of a forgotten tune descending from the sky. The white flakes, swirling with the circular motions of the wind, landed on the tired wooden platform and spread across the ground like a carpet. Amelia Hartmann stood wrapped tightly in her wool coat, under her yellow hair now turned gray. Her trembling fingers held an envelope, softened from being read too many times. The letter inside was clearly written about a dream of hers. Between the lines, there was hope. There was warmth, maybe even a chance to start again, hidden in the shadow of old age. At the bottom of the letter was the name, Jacob Miller, but the train had long gone, and no one had asked her name. No recognition had lit up anyone's eyes. No one had reached for her suitcase and said, "Let me carry that." Everyone leaving the station had someone waiting for them. A young bride had been swept into someone's arms. An elderly couple had walked away laughing with their grandchildren. A man had hugged his son so tightly it was as if time had frozen. But Amelia, she was still there, alone, still, like a ghost among the snow. Only when her knees began to lose strength did she move. She walked toward the wooden bench by the edge and sat down quietly in a corner that the stove's warmth couldn't reach. The snow under her boots had hardened with the moisture that seeped in. Each step echoed the silent shame within her. And at that moment, a soft voice was heard. "Are you okay, ma'am?" Amelia looked up. A young woman, probably not even in her 20s. The sleeveless apron she wore defied the cold, but her eyes held a sincere curiosity. Amelia smiled politely and said with a fragile voice, "I'm just waiting for someone." It wasn't a lie, but it was incomplete. The girl glanced at the letter, then pulled a small metal cup from her pocket and placed it in Amelia's hand. "Hot apple cider. My dad works at the post office. You can warm up inside if you'd like." Amelia shook her head gently, kindly refusing. But the girl left the cup anyway. "Still, maybe it'll help. You have a beautiful face." Amelia was a little shaken by those words. No one had called her beautiful in a long time, or kind, or even simply visible. The cold seeped through the marks the years had left on her body. She opened the envelope again and read the letter silently. "Your words feel warm, Amelia. I'm tired of the cold. I need someone kind." But Jacob Miller wasn't there. He wasn't late. He wasn't mistaken. He had never come. A man sitting on the bench across whispered to the woman next to him. Amelia didn't hear it, but the echo of words she'd heard for years was enough. Still hoping for love at her age? What a dream. She looked away, folded the letter, and placed it in her bag like a wound. She was 58, a lost note of youth now, a woman society called invisible. And yet, years ago, she had been a music teacher. She had worked as a midwife in rural towns. She'd been married for 19 years, until she lost her husband in an accident. This was the first time she had dared to love again since that day. A wagon sound pulled her out of her thoughts. She lifted her head and looked at the horse-drawn cart passing by. Hopefully. Maybe. But no. Children were playing among the grain sacks on the cart. The driver didn't even glance over. Amelia reached for the cup in her hand. The cider had gone cold. She took a sip. It didn't just warm her inside, it carried the weight of the years. And then, footsteps. This time, it was different. Not rushed rhythmic, heavy steps. She turned her head. A tall, broad-shouldered man was walking through the snow. A cloth-wrapped bundle peeked from his coat pocket. He wasn't walking directly toward her, but as he passed, he placed something on the bench next to her. Without a word, without a look, without a comment. Then he walked on, slowly disappearing into the snow. Amelia didn't move for a while. Then she reached for the cloth on the bench. She unwrapped it. Inside were still warm cornbread and slices of dried fruit. Tucked between them was a note. "You are not invisible." That note cracked something in Amelia's silent wall. She didn't cry, but her eyes filled. For someone to see her. Really see her. Not with pity, but with awareness. In that moment, the woman sitting on that bench was no longer alone. The world had shifted with a stranger's quiet words. She closed her eyes, filling the emptiness inside her with a small hope. She lifted the cup in her hand. The cider was cold now, but that sentence, it was warm. And so Amelia stood, slowly, picked up her bag, and started walking in the direction the stranger had gone. There was no invitation, no plan, but to be seen. Sometimes, it changes everything for a woman. Her steps grew heavier as the snow mixed with mud and stuck to the road. Amelia shifted her bag to her other hand and tried to turn her back to the wind. Her eyes were following the footprints of the man who had just left something on the bench. The prints had already started to fill with snow, but they were still visible, straight, firm, without hesitation. The path curved toward the edge of town, where he had disappeared among the fenced-in fields. But a strange feeling that had grown inside Amelia was enough to make her change direction. A woman who once thought she didn't belong now found meaning in every step she took. Maybe a place could be a refuge, even if it didn't belong to her. The scent of smoke drifting in the wind meant there was a stove burning nearby. Night was close. The sky had started turning into a leaden darkness, and a few stars were beginning to sparkle. The note was still in her palm, its edges slightly crumpled from her sweaty hand. "You are not invisible." A sentence written by a stranger, yet the first real word that had landed on years of her collected silence. The narrow path winding up the hills eventually led to a small barn. Next to it was a single-story building, flickering with a yellowish warmth. As Amelia approached, she saw the man. He was still wearing the same thick coat. His hair loosened and stuck to his forehead. He was drawing water from a wooden barrel with a bucket, carrying it to the animals' troughs inside. Amelia stopped for a moment. She didn't want to startle him, but she didn't want to approach unnoticed either. "Hello," she finally said. Her voice scattered like a leaf in the wind. The man didn't flinch. He turned to look at her slowly. His eyes were quiet, but not shallow. Deep. Familiar. Maybe he was someone who had chosen not to fix things, but to carry them. "I brought back what you left," Amelia said, showing him the cloth wrapped around the cornbread. "You left it, but it still kind of belongs to you." He lowered his head and chuckled softly. Then a short reply. "Figured you'd throw it out." "I almost did," Amelia said. "But I didn't." Neither of them spoke for a while. Only the sounds of snow and their breath were heard. The man placed the bucket down. He wiped his hands on his pants. "My name's Thomas," he said at last. "Thomas Reed. I'm Amelia Hartman. Don't you have a place for the night?" Thomas asked. There was no suspicion or anger in his tone, just plain concern. "No," said Amelia. "But I don't want to come off as begging." "No one's begging," said Thomas. "The cabin up there is empty. The stove's on. If you want, stay. Just for the night. What if I need to repay you? There's too much stew. You can help finish it. Not a cost, just saving it from going to waste." That's a kind of help too. For the first time, Amelia felt that a man offering her a place didn't also offer her a debt. There was no gratitude in his eyes. No scorekeeping. He had simply made space. And that space, for the first time in years, felt safe. The cabin stood at the end of a short path. Yellow lights spilled through the walls from the stove inside. The door was slightly ajar. When Amelia entered, warm air hit her face. Inside was tidy. A simple table, a corner with 2 chairs, a stove fed with coal, and a bed. Everything was plain, but cared for. Used, but not neglected. She held her hands out to the stove. Her fingertips slowly thawed from the cold of the years. She placed her bag next to the bed. When she straightened her back, Thomas came in with 2 bowls in his hands. One had a stew with meat and vegetables, the other a warm drink. "Don't ask what's in it," said Thomas, handing her the bowl. "But it's not bad." Amelia laughed. "It's been a long time since someone offered me such a genuine dinner." They ate together. They didn't talk. The silence wasn't heavy, it was understanding. As if both of them were carrying the weight of their own burdens, careful not to knock them over with a single word. Only the ticking of a clock and the soft sighs of the stove were heard. After dinner, Thomas stood up and placed a blanket at the end of the bed. "What you do tomorrow is up to you," he said. "Thank you," said Amelia. But in her voice, there was more than gratitude, a kind of relief. When a door opens, sometimes a person also opens a little inside. It was like that. That night, Amelia couldn't sleep for a long time. The moonlight leaking through cracks in the ceiling danced on the wall. The warmth of the stove seeped into her body, But the sounds of the past swirled in her mind. And among it all, one thought gnawed at her. Was this a beginning or just another stop on a long wait? Outside, the snow kept falling in silence. But inside, hope was crackling. Morning was born out of the silence outside. There was no rooster crowing, no wind, just the thin but persistent presence of snow. When Amelia opened her eyes, the room still held the warmth of the stove, but there was no steaming coffee or tea boiling on the stove. In that moment, she realized Thomas was already up, and that gave her a strange sense of comfort. Even silence had a rhythm here. The scent of the morning blended with dry wood and old wool. The only sounds were the crunch of snow and the distant, muffled strikes of a hammer. She slowly sat up and checked her bag. Inside were just a few pieces of clothing, an old brooch from her mother, and a photo she'd stuffed in her pocket during the trip, a snapshot of her smiling at a piano in her youth. At that moment, she realized there was no trace left of that smile on her face. She quietly shook hands with the tired eyes she saw in the mirror. But she wasn't giving up. Not anymore. When she opened the door and stepped outside, she found Thomas repairing the fence. As he removed rotten planks with a hammer in hand, his expression held the calm of someone doing a familiar job. When he saw her, he just nodded. It was warm enough inside, Amelia said. After driving the last nail into place, Thomas finally spoke. When the cabin was first built, the roof used to leak with every rain. I fixed it 4 times. But whenever someone comes by, the wind finds a new way in. It never fully seals. Amelia smiled. People are like that too, I suppose. Every time we patch something, the cracks start to leak somewhere else. Thomas didn't reply right away. Then he said, yeah, but every place that leaks is proof there's still life inside. A short but deep silence followed. Amelia turned her eyes to the snow-covered field. Everything looked white, everything looked new. But beneath every step was a forgotten, trampled past. Just then, a horse-drawn cart appeared on the path, shattering the calm. The driver was an old man in a full brown fur coat, with thick eyebrows peeking from under his glasses. A younger man sat beside him. Their faces weren't familiar, but there was suspicion in their eyes. The cart stopped. The younger man leaned forward. We were told there's a strange woman staying here, he said. Thomas narrowed his eyes. This land's open to everyone, he replied, short and firm. The young man went on, ignoring him. We just want to know who she is. Some people get tricked into coming out here. For some women, this place can be a trap. Amelia stepped forward. Her voice was calm but steady. No one tricked me. I came here on my own. And I stayed because the person I was waiting for didn't come. But someone saw me. That's why I'm here. The old man furrowed his brows. What's your name? Amelia Hartman. The man nodded. I've heard that name. It came up in a complaint file. Someone left you at the train station. That person might be wanted for fraud. Amelia's breath caught. That information was unexpected. What do you mean? The young man pulled out a paper from his pocket, wrinkled, the edges stained with soot. Using the name Jacob Miller, he invited at least 4 women to different addresses through letters. The women came. He never showed. Same kind of letters. Same words. And each time, the women's belongings went missing. Amelia's knees slightly buckled. The words written to her, "Your kind voice warms me." Were they the same? Were the words she thought were real part of a game? In that moment, both anger and shame surged inside her. Thomas looked at her. There was only one question in his eyes. Do you believe it? But Amelia's answer came from somewhere deeper. With a heavy sigh, she said, So I've believed in everything I didn't see with my own eyes. Not anymore. The young man and the old man spoke a little more, then left. The cart disappeared into the snow. What remained was only a sense of shaken stillness. That evening, Amelia cooked dinner. Silence was once again the guest at the table. Thomas spoke only once. Lies can make us forget who we are. But forgetting isn't always bad. Not everything, just enough to begin again. Amelia nodded. That night, she sat by the window. As a storm approached outside, she picked up her notebook. She stared at the blank page for a long time. Then she began to write. Today someone tried to bring down my past to break me. But I'll bury the past myself. With my own hands. And I'll build new stories over it. Ones that are real. Days quietly chased one another. The snow had now given way to mud. The ice melting around the fences had broken off like frozen pieces of the past. Every morning, Amelia got up and lit the stove, carefully stacking the wood Thomas had left, then moved into the kitchen to prepare food. At first, Thomas had just watched silently, but now, during meals, he spoke in short but meaningful sentences. Talking to him was like following an echo carved into the side of a mountain. The sound came late, but returned louder. As time went on, Emilia stayed longer. First the second night, then the third. But it was no longer just staying, it was settling. Little traces of her had begun to fill the cabin. A hair clip left on the windowsill, an old handkerchief hanging from the corner of the table, a pair of wool socks left near the stove. These were signs a woman belonged. But she was still trying to figure out what it meant. Belonging? Coincidence? Or maybe some kind of surrender? That morning, Thomas had left early. Emilia was alone. She wandered through the cabin for a while, rearranged things, washed an old sheet. Then she heard a strange noise outside. At first she thought it might be an animal. But the sound came again. And this time, it was closer. She took a step, then another. She approached the door. Her fingertips touched the handle. There was something just outside. When she opened it, she found a sack on the ground. An old piece of paper was attached to it. Staying where you don't belong is living in someone else's shadow. No name underneath. Just a symbolic mark. 3 crossed lines inside a circle. Was it a warning? A threat? This time, fear pierced her heart directly. Maybe this place had offered her warmth, but the world outside was still cold. And that world couldn't stand the idea of an older woman surviving on her own choices. She brought the sack inside. Without looking at what was in it, she set it aside. But the questions in her mind wouldn't leave her alone. Who was it? Why now? And more importantly, was this just a warning or the beginning of something bigger? When Thomas returned that evening, she didn't mention it. He looked tired. His coat was covered in mud from the ride back in the cart. One sleeve was torn. But what caught Emilia's attention most was the unease in his eyes. "Is everything okay?" she asked. Thomas nodded. But it wasn't an ordinary nod. More like a yes that didn't want to be asked further. Emilia stayed silent. But her eyes watched his every move that night. Later, when a second sound came from outside, she jumped. This time, it wasn't just a noise, it was the sharp creak of the barn door opening. Emilia slowly approached the window. The moonlight was faint, but the barn door was open. And the shadows inside, there was more than one person. Suddenly, her blood ran cold. Where was Thomas? She knocked on his door. No answer. She quickly grabbed her coat and stepped outside. Footprints. Yes, several sets going in different directions. One was heavy, pressing deeper into the snow. Another was lighter, more hesitant. And the third, just like the person who left the sack that morning, faced directly toward the cabin. And then, a scream. Emilia didn't hesitate. The sound had come from the barn. When she got there, she saw Thomas on his knees. He was holding his arm. There was blood. Just behind him, a shadow vanished into the darkness. Despite her age, her loneliness, her fragility, one thing surged in her heart at that moment: the instinct to protect. She ran to him and dropped to her knees. "You're hurt," she said. Thomas lifted his head. His eyes were still on the attacker's trail, but his voice was calm. "It's nothing. Just the wrist. But be careful." He wasn't alone. Emilia looked around in shock. This wasn't just a warning anymore. It was clear someone wasn't happy she was here. Maybe Thomas wasn't even the target. Maybe it was her. Because a woman they thought invisible was now leaving a mark on a man's life. Because a woman who came from silence had started to stay. She grabbed Thomas by the arm and helped him back to the cabin. The moment they got inside, she locked the door. She stoked the stove, tore up old linen, and wrapped his wound. She couldn't tell if her hands were shaking from fear or anger. Thomas quietly bore the pain, gritted his teeth, but didn't complain. Finally, Emilia spoke. "Someone out there doesn't want me here. But they don't know I can't live with anyone else's permission anymore. I won't look away. I won't step back." Thomas looked at her. "Then we'll stand together." That night, they didn't sleep. Thomas sat in the chair by the stove. Emilia sat across from him. Between them was only the faint light and a bond that no longer belonged to the past. Outside, the snow had started again. But inside, nothing had been shaken. Morning came before the night had fully disappeared. The sky was still leaden, the air still freezing. But the ticking clock inside the cabin echoed like a reminder they were still alive. Emilia had dozed off just before dawn. She was curled up in a chair, wrapped in a blanket in front of the stove. Thomas sat across from her, still awake. His eyes were puffy, his face sagged, but his expression was steady. When Amelia opened her eyes, the first thing she noticed was his quiet presence. "You didn't sleep at all?" she whispered. Thomas shook his head. "I'm not good at turning my back after an attack." This wasn't the first, was it? Amelia's voice was more firm this time. Her question was direct, leaving no room to dodge. Thomas thought for a moment. Then he spoke slowly. "They've tried before. Living alone on this land is one thing. But living with a woman, especially one they don't know the past of, that's something else for them. A threat." Amelia pulled the blanket tighter around her. Who could she possibly be a threat to? An aging, fragile, but still upright woman. How could her presence scare people so much? The answer was bitter, because it was unfamiliar. Because women were expected to be either young or hidden in the shadows. There was no space for anyone in between. Thomas stood up. The cloth wrapped around his arm was seeping. Amelia immediately jumped to her feet. "We need to change that," she said. "It's just surface," Thomas replied, but his voice sounded tired now. He didn't resist as he extended his arm. Amelia quietly unwrapped the cloth. She examined the wound. It wasn't deep, but the blow had landed on an old scar. He'd been injured there before, clearly. When she held her hand over that mark a little too long, Thomas's face tensed slightly. "When did this happen?" Amelia asked. This time, Thomas didn't look away. 7 years ago. I was fixing the fences. Some people came. They wanted to take my things. I didn't give them up." Amelia pulled her hand back. It felt like his silence was bleeding just as much as his wound. But that silence didn't smell of guilt, it smelled of resistance. That day, Thomas didn't go outside. Amelia tidied the cabin, organized old books, oiled the door hinges. Then she found small wooden figures on Thomas's workbench. One was a woman, long-haired, her head slightly bowed. Another was a man, kneeling with a child on his lap. And the third was still an uncarved block of wood. It didn't look like anyone yet, but the sense of incompletion seemed to finish the story all on its own. Amelia stared at them for a long time. Then, without touching anything, she placed them back. That night, another storm rolled in. But this time, there was a different sound inside. A knock on the door. Amelia jumped from her seat. Thomas moved toward the door immediately. This time, he had his weapon in hand. When the knock came again, he quietly unlatched the door. With the gust of icy air, someone stepped in, a small child. His clothes were old, his feet bare and wet. In his hand was an envelope. "They sent me to you," he said. Thomas and Amelia both bent down at the same time. The child looked about 8 years old, his hair messy, his eyes wide. But in his gaze, there was not so much fear as familiarity, as if even fear had become routine to him. He held out the envelope. On it was a single line. "This child will be safe with you." Thomas set the envelope aside, gave the boy a blanket, and rubbed his hands. Amelia quickly prepared a warm drink. They didn't ask his name right away. First he warmed up, then ate a little. Only then did he whisper, "My name is Eli." "Who sent you, Eli?" Amelia asked. "I don't know," the boy said. "But my mom always said, one day someone will show you the way." In that moment, Amelia's eyes filled with tears. Those words were exactly what her own mother had once told her. One day, someone will show you the way. But the courage to go, you'll have to find that yourself. Eli's arrival was quiet, but its effect spread like an echo. That night, 3 people slept in the same cabin. One with the past, one with the present, one with the future. And the snow kept falling. But inside, there was only warmth now. Morning didn't come by scattering the gray clouds. But finally, the sun created a sparkle on the white snow. Ice-covered branches shone like crystals. Amelia stood by the window, listening to the little melody Eli hummed by the stove. The boy had seemed more at ease over the past few days. His eyes were still watchful, but that endless urge to run was gone. Maybe, for the first time, he felt like he could stay somewhere. Thomas had taken Eli to the workbench, and together they carved a small bird figure. For the first time, the child hadn't wanted to let go of something he made with his own hands. Amelia was filled with a quiet conflict. Staying. When had it become a decision? At first, her purpose was simply to wait. Then came one night. Then a week. Now, as she hung Eli's tiny boots in front of the stove, it was impossible not to feel that she belonged here. But the past was still breathing. And that breath returned one evening by knocking on the door. This time, the knock was heavy. Not the cold, but the sound itself seeped inside. Thomas picked up his axe. Emilia, however, felt something was different this time. When the door opened, a familiar silhouette stood behind it. His back hunched, his beard darkened, and his voice, like an old song, was cracked. "Emilia," he said. Her knees bent slightly. Because that voice, it was an echo she thought she had forgotten. Jacob, yes. Standing before her was Jacob Miller, the one who had sent her letters, then disappeared. But now he wasn't the man from her dreams. He was the disappointment made flesh. His eyes were teary, not from real crying, but from the burns of time and regret. He put his hands in his pockets and spoke with a trembling voice. "I couldn't wait for you. I couldn't wait because I didn't even trust myself. I didn't have the courage to go to the station that day. Later, I tried to reach you, but time slipped away, and I waited for you to write again. But now, I've come." Emilia said nothing. She was listening, but not absorbing. Eli peeked from the corner of the door. Thomas stood in the background, like stone. Jacob took a step forward. "I'm still the same man." And in that moment, Emilia closed her eyes. Not as a reaction, but as a decision. She stepped forward to meet Jacob eye to eye. Then she spoke with a clear, unwavering voice. "No, you're not. And I'm not the same woman either." Jacob's face fell. Her words hit not just him, but his former self. Emilia continued. "You invited me to a place I dreamed of, and then never came. And I forgave you. But my coming back doesn't mean I'm holding on to the past. I have a different life now. One that doesn't have a name but is real." Jacob lowered his head. His back bent even more. "Then, I just wanted to say goodbye." Emilia nodded. "There's no need for goodbye, because we never really began." He turned and walked away, leaving behind a deep trail as he disappeared into the snow. And when the door closed again, the three inside remained silent for a while. But this time, the silence wasn't mourning. It was closure. And sometimes, closures are more sacred than beginnings. At dinner, Eli asked Thomas, "Are we a family?" Thomas paused. Emilia set down her spoon. The silence was shy at first, then full of meaning. Thomas didn't answer with words. He simply pulled a small wooden figure from his pocket. The one he finished that day, the sculpture of three figures holding hands. A miniature of Eli in the middle, two adults beside him, hand in hand, equal, wordless, but clear. Emilia touched the figure. Sometimes families aren't born. Sometimes they're found. Sometimes they're built. And sometimes, we just stay. For the first time, Thomas looked directly into her eyes and smiled. "Welcome." That night, Emilia wrote this in her journal by the stove. "They saw me as old, as worn. But here, everything that ages is considered more valuable. The shadow of a tree grows longer with age. And I am no longer a shadow. I am myself. I didn't come back. I didn't leave. I stayed. Because sometimes, you don't need someone to choose you. You just need someone to see you. And that person gives you not just a house, but the meaning of home." By morning, the sun shone as if it had never stopped rising. Birds were singing, and Eli was chasing Thomas in the yard. Emilia stood at the window, smiling as she watched them. And maybe, in that moment, she understood. A woman's story isn't written only in her youth, but also while the snow falls, and with every white strand that touches her hair. And some women are not rescued. Some women choose themselves. The Yindy, by the way, we noticed something small. Most people who watch these stories aren't actually subscribed to the channel. Maybe we get caught up in the moment, or just forget to hit the button. But your support truly helps us keep creating stories like this. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel.